What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 689. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, happy belated birthday. Welcome back from the PT.
Thank you. Yeah, the circumstances didn't line up for us to get a show out last week. You were stuck in South Dakota in a blizzard.
I literally was. That actually happened.
I was dealing with a kid home from daycare all week with some sort of flu. So we were getting to a circle up now, and I had a fantastic 40th birthday at the PT.
Yeah, that was really one of the highlights because it felt pretty cool to be back with everybody and, kind of see our bigger social circle, right? All in the same place. But, we got to have a really nice birthday dinner for you, and it was super. I mean, that was great. You and I kind of looked at each other after, and we're like, that felt like old times. All the characters were there.
Yeah, we got to spend the whole dinner listening to Huey and Ben argue about two players who were even before my time, which one was better. That was
which is that like if has dinner really begun until that argument comes out?
Right.
Ranking people, Paulo complaining about stuff. It was perfect.
It was great.
But it was nice to be back there. We're going to be talking about the PT, about the limited and how it went there for you and some of the stuff around that as well. Before we do, though, let's get into our sponsors. TCG Player and Channel Fireball have teamed up to create a subscription that every Magic player needs. You can get exclusive CFB Pro content. So that's right. That's just CFB Pro, right? The thing that you've heard about or hopefully been getting for a while now. That's content produced by some of the best players and minds in the game, with a lot of the goal being to help you improve, to keep you up to date on the information, help you win tournaments, that type of stuff. And you also, though, get free shipping and tracking on direct by TCG player orders, and you get bonus bucks and awesome promos at TCGplayer.com. And you get all that for just $6.99 a month. And that includes the CFB Pro and the extra stuff too. So there's a link in the show notes if you'd like to check that out and get the TCG Player subscription going. Also, if you want to just buy cards, TCG Player is the place to go. They're the marketplace. They're the huge player here, after having acquired Channel Fireball, merged with eBay, all that kind of stuff. They are the number one place to go. And that's because they have the marketplace. And that's the thing that they figured out a long time ago and have really kind of ridden the wave of ever since, which is they allow smaller shops to sell on their platform. And what that means is that you get to have all the benefits of shopping at multiple shops at the same time for price, condition, shipping, reliability, all of that kind of stuff. And you can do it all in one place. That's tcgplayer.com. If you do decide to buy any cards over there, if you use the affiliate link in the show notes, it does help us out. It lets them know that we're the ones that sent you over, and it helps support the show. So the show is also brought to you by Patreon, and the fine people over at Patreon who support us are patrons. They, you can just go to patreon.com/limited resources and check it out. It's just a way to support your favorite content creators. And if we happen to be one of those, well, that's the place to go. We want to say thank you to everybody who supports us there. One of the things you get as a patron, one of the many things, is you get access to the Patreon feed. And that gets you access to the Patreon question of the week. This one comes from Daniel, who says, "Hey, Marshall and Luis, how often do you guys go 0-3 in drafts? Sometimes I can get pretty discouraged when I go on a losing streak, even though I know it could be just the luck of the draw. Listening to you guys talk so knowledgeably about Magic, it can be easy to think that you guys never have bad drafts. Do you have any advice for folks when they are on losing streaks?"
So the answer to that question is I basically never go 0-3.
That is true, though, right? You basically never do, right?
Well, for a couple reasons. One is that if I'm drafting on Magic Online and I go 0-2, I'm going to drop because you can't win additional prizes.
You've learned what you've wanted to learn from that draft, and you'll move on. But what about if you lose your first three matches in a best of one on Arena?
Yeah, I certainly can. Like that does actually happen. And so that was a little tongue in cheek, but I'm actually trying to look up how many times I've gone 0-3 at the PT, and I don't think it's very many times. So I'll try to figure that out at some point here. But the crux of the question isn't really as much, hey, do you ever go 3? It's mostly, what do you do when you have a losing streak? And this is a question we've been asked tons of times over the course of the show. And even outside the show, I've gotten asked this on stream. I know you have as well. No, I think they ask me a little bit more often because with you, they can just observe what happens when someone's on a losing streak.
They can see me throwing stuff around my office.
It doesn't organically come up when you watch me stream as often. No, look, we've all had our losing streaks, and really there's a couple ways to handle it. It also depends, of course, on each person, but taking a break is always a completely legit answer. You know, if I've always said, if Magic's frustrating you, if you're not having fun, then you don't have to do it. Like, you can do something else. Like, and that sometimes can get you a greater appreciation for it. I know when I was really burned out and traveling for Grand Prix, I just didn't for a while. And then when I started doing it again, I was like, oh, this is great. I really, happy to do this. Like, this is a lot of fun. Another thing you can do is try to change up what you're doing. Maybe you're on a losing streak because you're doing something that would lead you to be on a losing streak. And I would say that in general, you should reevaluate kind of like your approach to things. A good way would be if you lose with your deck and construct it a lot. I think one of the first things someone would do would clearly be like, hey, maybe this deck's not good in this format. Maybe, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. With draft, it's a little trickier because you draft a new deck every time, but you might look and be like, oh, wow, I really end up with too many expensive cards in my deck. Or I think that this color combination is good and I draft it often, but it turns out it's actually not that good. And I'm really putting myself in a bad spot by drafting it. So I think between taking a break and reevaluating and trying to change your strategy, those are usually two pretty good tools in your arsenal to deal with losing streaks.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the taking a break is the kind of the number one go-to, back to my poker days, that was also the advice, because if you're tilting and you're playing poker, you can lose money a lot faster than you can win it. And you can put a really big dent in what would otherwise have been a healthy bankroll or a good month or whatever, if you're, susceptible to tilt. And the number one thing on the short term was get up from the table and go for a walk, like reset. And then if you can't, leave, like get away from the game. And, I remember one of the things that I did that I kind of, because there was a long time where I was playing what I would call like semi-professionally. I had a job, so it wasn't like my source of income, but I was kind of like augmenting it with that. But then, when I quit that job and I was, going to do the Magic stuff, the poker was kind of my in between, right? It was the thing that I could just put hours into and turn those hours into money so that I could float while I was trying to get the Magic stuff going. And
right.
When I did that, I said, look, I need to up my game even further. I need to really take this seriously, like as if it were my straight up job, because now it is becoming a big portion of it. And one of the rules that I set for myself is that I only played when I felt like I was playing my A game. And that's really hard because it doesn't take that much to put you into B game, right? Maybe you just had a bad day. You got into a fight with your significant other. You got some bad news. You just didn't sleep good, whatever. That can easily just bump you from like very focused, very, very good down into a mode where like you're probably a winner in the game. You're probably a little better than the other people, but you're kind of on that fringe. And so I kind of made it a rule for myself that I would only go in and play if I felt like I was capable of my A game. And the truth is that over a session, I probably dipped down into B and then back up to A. But if I felt like I was really starting to, I stopped playing. But the difference with Magic is that it's very few people's job. I don't have that approach to Magic, like, because if I lose a draft, it isn't my income like flying away. It's it's a little bit of money. I'd prefer not to lose it, but it's not the same thing as, when you're losing the money you need. And so, for me, it gets really interesting because when I try to approach those problems, one of the things that I like about Magic is that it can be frustrating, which I know sounds weird, but it makes me want to overcome that even more. Right.
Yeah.
And so like for me, it's a matter of finding that fine line, between, I want to win, but not, I am really not enjoying this anymore and I don't want to engage with it, right? That when I get to that point, then that's take a break time. And up until that point, it's not. Also, the one other thing I want to say about Daniel's question is, and you touched on it, Luis, but it's, the real thing is like, it's not about who went 0-3 or that kind of stuff. It's, were you up to your expectations? Were you up to your norm? Were you up to where you hope to compete, right? Because if you're relatively new to Magic, you're actually going to go 0-3 like kind of a lot. It's going to happen. You're going to screw up the draft. You're not playing super great. And, you're going to find yourself in that position. But, when you're as far along in it as I am, like going 0-3 is like, what the hell happened here? Like that is a rarity. Like I had to try something crazy in the draft or run really bad. And for somebody like Luis, it's like, I don't know if you found your stat, Luis, but even at the PT, you don't go 0-3 and you're not playing against randoms on Arena. We're talking about, people that qualified for the Pro Tour. And so, the toughest crowd you can basically face. So, I would say, for anybody listening to this, the real key is, are you playing up to your ability? Are you playing up to your skill level? And if you feel like you're not, and that's frustrating you, then go ahead and take the break.
I have the 6 most draft trophies at the Pro Tour.
Do you really?
Mm-hmm. Behind Finkel, Paulo, Raf Levy, Shota, and Yuya. And at this point, Yuya has to have an asterisk. So that
Definitely.
would be.
So you're actually fifth.
Fifth.
Nice. Wow. We should do a podcast about limited. All right. Let's open up a boosty. And I actually I got a few at the Pro Tour, Luis. So I'm going to do the ultra rare actual pack in hand.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. I get it still smells exactly the same. That's nice. Now this I don't like. I don't know if it's just the packs that I happen to get my hands on, but the freaking rares up front. So I already know what it is.
No, I've noticed that too. I don't love it.
Yeah, but I'm going to put it to the back because we need some suspense here for the Kraken pack. All right, first card out is the Surgical Bay. That's the blue sphere. I have lessened the number of spheres that I'm willing to run, Luis. I now hover between 1, kind of where I want to be, or sometimes 2. But before I would run 3 to 4, and I don't do that anymore. Yeah,
I would say that 1 is probably close to the correct number of spheres. Yeah. Maybe 0. Like maybe I think 0, it's probably closer to 0 than 2.
Yeah, I feel like 1 you can
0 than 2.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so Surgical Bay. Also, this is the blue one, so really not great. Ichor Synthesizer. Feels like maybe this one would have played better given the context of the set if the threshold was 3 oil counters rather than the full 4. 4 is actually quite a bit. Like it takes a long time to get this synthesizer, going. And since, my mindset is that blue needs a bump, there's one little knob I might turn on that.
It is already one of the best blue commons. That and Gitaxian Raptor are competing, I think, for the top slots.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think it's really much of a consideration here. First pick.
Yeah, the Dross Pits. That's the black sphere. No. Here's a card that's actually okay. Mandible just this year. That's the 1 and a white 2/1 lifelinker that gets bigger when artifacts ETB.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Would prefer not to be quite so committal in the early stages of the draft, because especially since here's one big thing, by the way, we found this in our PT testing that was pretty valuable. If you just play best of 1 on Arena, the blue-white artifact deck is going to come across to you as significantly better than if you play best of 3, because everyone just gets a couple free shatters and destroy target artifact cards and doesn't main deck them. If you play best of 3, you've got people siding up to 2 or 3 artifact removal spells, and that actually does impact the deck's viability. Not saying you can't draft blue-white, just saying you should downgrade it a little, and I would not want to start in blue-white. Though it is if it's open, you should draft it. That's generally the case for a lot of these archetypes. But because of that weakness, I think you should be a little cautious about it.
And you're talking about, effectively sideboard cards that people can pick up almost at the end of the pack and just have at the ready.
Yep, and or things like Red Sun's Twilight, which is actually I actually have come around on that just being a main deck card. I think it's just a good card.
Oh, okay.
But
against blue white, it's like.
But against blue white, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Flensing Raptor. That's a 2 and a white 2/2 flying toxic 1, and when it ETBs, you can jump another toxic creature and give it +1/+1. Card's been real good.
Yeah, I think that it's probably less good for its archetype than Mandible Justiciar is for blue-white. But Flensing Raptor fits into white-green or black-green pretty well. And you can honestly play this card in white red if you need to. Sorry, white, black, and white, green.
Yeah.
You can honestly play this card in white red if you really need to.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't mind taking a Flensing Raptor if there's nothing better running around.
Yeah, that's certainly the number one pick right now. Next is Infectious Inquiry. This is the 2 and a black sorcery. Draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, and each opponent gets a poison counter. I actually have been running one of these in my black-white decks. Yeah, poison counter matters. You're aggressive enough to take a little bit of time off where you've got a board presence, you're still doing things, and the loss of life doesn't hurt you as much when you're the one beating down. Plus, you have a bunch of 1-drops in your deck, so even on turn 4, you can Inquiry plus a 1 ball. Like, a lot going for it, actually.
Yeah, the card is a lot better than you might think based on a lot of what else is going on in the format. But again, not a card I want to take super early. It's certainly at its best in white-black, I would say.
Yeah. Chimney Rabble.
This card has gone up in my estimation significantly. Mm-hmm. I don't mind running as many. The last deck I trophied with on Magic Online yesterday had 4 of them. Actually, I had the clunkiest deck in the world. It had 4 Chimney Rabbles and 3 Testament Bearers. So I only started 5 of those 7, but I sided up to more in the right matchups.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, the truth is that from day one, Chimney Rabble has been the best common in the set. It is by 17 lands. I'm referencing that, but it still is. It's actually tied for Contagious Vorak today. I kind of says a lot, right? Because when you read this card, there's really nothing to do with the set, right? Like there's no set mechanics. They're not pushing any theme here. It's just power, toughness, haste. And this card, though, gives you enough of those things and happens to fit into the best archetype as the premier 4-drop for it at common, and off you go. Yeah.
I still don't think that it's necessarily I think Hexgold Slash is better than Chimney Rabble.
You would take it over it.
I would take Hexgold Slash over Chimney Rabble basically every single time. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that Chimney Rabble isn't very, very good. I don't know. Are you taking Chimney Rabbles over Hexgold Slashes? You're not, right?
No, I'm not. And my reasoning is, I mean, I don't know, maybe the numbers challenge this, right? Like currently, the Rabble's performing about 1% better than Slash, right? But the thing that is difficult to sort out with these types of cards, right? And we can dig into this here, by the way. Like, let's take a look at the ALSA, right? Which is the average last seen at. So that's, about where the card tends to get picked. Rabble gets picked around 5.6. So between picks 5 and 6.
Okay, not looking at it, I'm guessing Hexgold Slash is between 2 and 3.
You're close. It's 3.3. So just on the other side of 3, which is, about as high as commons tend to get, The 3 is kind of the gold standard. The highest, let me just rearrange by ALSA. So the highest ALSA is Anoint with Affliction, which is an ALSA of 2.8. Then it's Planar Disruption at 2.9. Those are the only 2 that are under 3. And, the next ones are 3.18, 3.2, and then Hexgold Slash at 3.3. So it's the 5th highest ALSA in the set at common. So, my thought process is, well, removal's harder to get than a 4-drop, right? Because if I have access to Hexgold Slash, there's not very much in the set that replaces that ability. Yeah. But if I'm in Chimney Rabble, there actually is. Look at the other
told you about it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If I had 2 fewer Chimney Rabbles, then I would just play 3 Testament Bearers and 2 Chimney Rabbles, and it would be about the same, like in a lot of ways.
Right. The other consideration that, would lead me to take it is simply the fact that one of them costs 1 mana and one of them costs 4. I will play literally as many playable 1-drops as I can fit in my deck, but there's a limit to how many 4s I can play. So yes, I would also take Hexgold Slash, even though it's weird, right? Because we have to kind of conflict with what the numbers say on some level. Sinew Dancer is next. That's the white 1/1, and you can pay 3 and a white to tap it and tap a creature, but if they're corrupted, then you can just pay white.
This one I'm not a huge fan of. Like, it is playable if you have enough poison stuff going on, but you can't spend 4 mana to deactivate this and expect to win very many games.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. Carnivorous Canopy, that's the 2 and a green sorcery. Destroy an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying, and you can proliferate if its mana value is 3 or less. there's one of the ones you were talking about, right? Just if you're in a green deck, you end up with one or two of these just sort of randomly. And if your opponent's in blue-white, you just bring them in.
Yeah, and this is a card, which is, I think, also a card you can main deck just fine, but not a card that I'm, really wanting to play against when I'm blue-white.
Volshock Splitter. This is another 4, right? This is kind of what we were talking about. So this is 3 in a red for effectively a 4/2 creature. It has for Mirrodin. You can equip it for 2 in a red.
I really like the for Mirrodin abilities. Like I already can tell as a preview to the Sunset Show, I think that might be the best mechanic they have in the set in terms of how it played out. Volshock Splitter is fine. I'm really not excited about any of these cards.
I would be on Flensing Raptor right now.
I think I'd be on Chimney Rabble.
Yeah, that's probably smarter, but I'm not very smart. Next is Venomous Brutalizer, 2GG 4/4 Toxic 3, and when it ETBs, you can pay 1 and a green to proliferate.
This is the pick I made at the PT that I kind of regret, though. I think and I'll talk about that when we go over it.
So you have regretted a draft pick.
I have indeed regretted a draft pick. Yes.
So you'll tell us about that in a minute.
Yeah, I'll get to that soon. But the card's fine. It's probably better. No, I would still take the Chimney Rabble over it, I think.
Okay.
It's close,
what's the color consideration there?
Well, red is better than green. That is part of it. Mm-hmm. And then I think that just those two cards are pretty comparable. They're the same amount of stats. One's a lot better against Text Gold Slash.
True. That is true. Yeah. Also, 2GG versus 3 in a red, that can come up as well. Next is Awaken the Sleeper. That's the threaten effect for 3 in a red.
I haven't really found this one to be great.
No, I haven't either. There's a few cards in black-red that support, sacrificing things, but they're uncommon or difficult to set up. And so Awaken the Sleeper is not really on my list. Last uncommon is Hex Gold Hover Wings. This is the 3 in a white for Mirrodin equipment. Creature gets flying, and creatures you control that are equipped get +1/+0, and it has an equip cost of 2 in a white.
Oh, I love this one. This I would take. It's just really effective in the red-white deck in particular because it buffs all your equipment effectively. But even in something like green-white or black-white, it's just a good value card. You play it as a 3/2 flyer, trade it off, and then all of a sudden your random dorky ground creatures become real threats.
Yeah, and they even pushed it a little bit. The equip cost of 2 in a white. Wouldn't have been shocked if they made it 3 in a white. You're putting these are the types of cards that end games if not dealt with, and they can be frustrating to play against. But I would definitely take the Hover Wings. Until we get to our Mythic Rare.
Mythic Rare.
Ichor Moon Gauntlet.
No, that one's a straight 0. So let's not waste our time.
Yeah, Ichor Moon Gauntlet is the one that cares about planeswalkers and does a bunch of nonsense. So Hex Gold Hover Wings. Let's do one more crack a pack. I'll kind of cruise through this one.
Sounds good.
But we have. I got packs in my hand, and what am I supposed to do? Okay. Oh yeah. I'm gonna full PT it here, and I'm gonna move these cards to the bottom like you do, when you.
Nice.
By the way, I gave you props on the stream for that.
Oh, for what?
Well, how there's actually it wasn't on the stream, it was on a rehearsal. But how one card's faced the other way.
Yeah.
And how you've done so many PT drafts that you just know, you just pick it up, flip it over. I think you were like chit-chatting or something. You weren't even, but some of the people in there who hadn't, they're, oh God, they're flipping it over. Now they're looking at their cards and they're just like, what am I supposed to do? And they can't figure out where it goes. It was kind of funny. All right. First card out is Furnace Skull Bomb. That's the red Skull Bomb.
Yeah. Disappointing. It turns out the oil is kind of weird in the set where yes, you want oil counters on some of your things. Mm-hmm. There's not that many cards in the set that actually care about going from 2 to 4 oil counters. Yeah.
It's tough because this is also the type of card that you're more likely to just want to cycle it for the 2 mana just because even the extra mana ends up costing a bit much, gets a little uncomfortable. Escaped Experiment. I think we can just let it escape.
Yeah.
That's the 2/1 for 1 and a blue. Don't want it.
All right, -X, -O's.
Right. Planar Disruption. So that's the 1 and a white. Yeah, good card. Certainly front runner here. This one is Dune Mover, which I actually saw quite a few people playing at the PT, but I've been kind of mediocre on it. That's the 2-mana 2/1 toxic one. And when it ETBs, you can look for a basic land and put it on top of your library.
It's fine. I mean, it does the job. Like I think, yes, the card's not exciting. I'm not going to claim it is, but I think that Dune Mover is a perfectly acceptable card to have in your deck. Not really looking to take it this early, but it's okay.
Duress. No.
Sideboard, yeah.
Ruthless Predation. That's the one in a green sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+2 and then fights.
Yeah, I guess I don't hate that. I would start with Planar Disruption over Ruthless Predation. Planar Disruption is the front runner here.
Here's another, by the way, man, your statement about blue-white's kind of echoing here. Here's a Shrapnel Slinger. This is the 1 in a red 2/2, but when it ETBs, you can sack a creature. It can be itself if you'd like. And when you do, you destroy an artifact an opponent controls.
Yeah, I mean, that card is very effective against blue-white.
Yeah,
it just kind of gets the stuff for free.
Right, and it's another one that sits in your sideboard and just pops in. Quicksilver Fisher. This is the 3/blue 4/3 flyer. When it ETBs, you loot.
I just don't really want to take a blue card this early, and especially wouldn't be taking a blue common. And then also, like, it's a 5-mana card. It's just not that good.
I know. These are the cards that make the old school players just shriek, because you're just like, how could this not be good?
I mean, look at Sky Eel School back in original Scars of Mirrodin. It was 3/blue 3/3 flying. When the ETBs, draw a card, discard a card. And like, I liked that card in that set. I thought it was pretty good.
Definitely. And this one's just upgraded and worse.
Yeah.
Ichor Spit Basilisk. This is a 2 in a green 1/3 Death Touch Toxic 1. Does not have reach, even though I, for some reason, always think it has reach.
It's fine, but not something I'm really excited about.
This next one's really not for the faint of heart. Like, you have to be extremely brave to even look at this card. It's Tamio's Logbook. That's the 2 in a blue artifact. You can pay 6 mana, tap it, draw a card, but the ability gets 1 cheaper for each other artifact you control.
Yeah, I did teach some Zoomers a lesson with that card in a money draft on Sunday, but no, it is not a good card.
Did you teach them a lesson by passing it to them?
No, I drafted oily artifacts, Jeskai artifacts.
That's right. You sent me a picture. Next, this is a card I like a lot. Atrax's Skitterfang. This is the 3-mana 2/2.
This is great.
Yeah, when it ETBs with 3 oil counters. And the beginning of combat on your turn, you can remove one. And when you do, target creature you control, you can get your choice of Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, or Lifelink. This card's good.
Yeah,
definitely.
I would take Skitterfang over Planar Disruption.
I would too, especially being colorless is nice. Next is Apostle of Invasion. This is the 4 white 4/4 flyer with Corrupted. It gets double strike.
Yeah, this card featured in a kind of funny Twitter story where someone had posted, which I thought was a really cool post they made. They're like, yeah, I played against Martin Juza, and because of the open deck list, I knew he had a bunch of Hex Gold slashes, and he played. At the end of my turn, he asked how much toughness one of my creatures had, and it had 3 because I used a combat trick. And he had 1 red mana up and 1 card in hand, so I thought he had a Hex Gold slash. So on the next turn, I didn't play a 4/4 flying toxic creature because of Hex Gold slash, and I think it might have cost me because I made a different play instead. And then people were kind of quick to point out that the 4/4 flyer is not actually even toxic. So,
it's not at all.
But it was a cool story. I mean, people do very little of admitting their mistakes. So it's cool to see that.
Even though we all can relate, to
yes.
That. Our rare, we actually have a foil here too. Our rare is Karamonix, the Rat King. That's the 1 black 3/3 toxic one. Other rats get toxic one that you control. And when it ETBs, you can look at the top 5 cards of your library and reveal any number of rat cards and put them into your hand.
Oh yeah, the Rat King. I mean, it's mostly just a toxic creature.
It's basically just like an okay, 3/3 toxic one for 3. But I would take the Skitterfang all day over that. Our foil is Testament Bearer. It's actually ended up being pretty good. 3 and a black for a 4/1, and when it dies, you look at top 3 cards of your library, you put one of them in your hand, and the other 2 in your graveyard. Yeah. Decent card, but yeah, Atrax's Skitterfang, give it to me.
Yeah, I mean, starting out with a very powerful colorless card that goes into any strategy. Like it's good in any deck, except with the exception of like 7 creature blue black, which is not really where you want to be anyway. Very big fan of the Skitterfang, and it's a great early pick.
All right, so that is what we will take here. How was a PT? We had talked before on the show before about how you tested, right? You had been kind of pushing towards the Magic Online drafts rather than doing them and trying to do in-person drafts for the rest of the team when possible. How did that end up panning out for you, and how did it line up with what you saw at the PT?
I felt very well prepared for the draft portion. I kind of knew what the different decks were and was comfortable drafting all of them. I still don't like this format very much, like as it is. Like, I mean, to give you an example, in my feature draft, right, the first draft, both players to my left and right opened the Wanderer. That was their first pick of the draft.
Oh my God, so, that's brutal.
And it was just like, I don't know. Like and then round 1, I play against Willie Edel, and he plays. I mean, you saw it. He just plays a Masticore on turn 5 both games, and 4 turns later I die. Yep. That was it. That was the entire.
That was the
game.
Story.
Like I didn't have anything that could get rid of it. So, yeah. I mean, that's not. That part that whole deal is not super fun, right? Like, yeah. I'm not saying that that couldn't have happened in other formats. It very clearly could have, but So in the first draft, I started with a Viral Spawning as the only plausible card. I don't really think that there was much of another option there. And then I was put in the position to take Venomous Brutalizer or Drown and Ichor. And I took the Brutalizer. I wish I had taken the Drown and Ichor. Well, yes and no. I think I should have taken the Drown and Ichor. I don't think that was a good pick. I really didn't want to commit to a second color, but as it turns out, it's just the disparity in power level there is too high. I don't think I should have made the pick I made. Mm-hmm. Both the players next to me are drafting black-white, so wow. I don't think it would have been better for me to go into Drown and Ichor there. That doesn't make the pick less bad, given the information I had at the time. Mm-hmm. Overall, I don't think it would have turned out better for me, because I think I would have just abandoned the Drown and Ichor, and certainly been green still, because as you saw, the green was the only color open for me. Yeah. Like,
I mean, it took forever for you to get that second color like actually locked in, because you just ended up taking green cards.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like I was trying to, with the Drown and Ichor pick aside, take green cards over better cards in other colors for the most part. I was just taking the best card in each pack was green almost every time. Mm-hmm. But I also just opened not great. Like I took Planar Disruption pick 1 pack 2 when I had all green cards. And it's like I took a decent common of a different color that wasn't even open. Like I didn't think white was open. Mm-hmm. I ended up with a couple white cards because I opened Annex Sentry or whatever in pack 3, the Fiend Hunter. So I ended up basically mono green with like 3 white cards, just like some white removal spells. And that was fine. But I ended up going 1-2, losing pretty badly to Masticore, beating Autumn in a really, really close 3-game match, and then losing to Blue-Black Poison that game 3 just plays turn 2 Mirror that taps for mana, turn 3 Archfiend of the Dross, and like that was it.
And that's it. Yeah, that's one of the best cards in the set.
I had no answers to that card besides the Planar Disruption, which I didn't draw. Well, I guess actually the Annex Sentry could have exiled it too, but didn't draw that either. But I mean, so I ended up with an 8-8 record at the PT, losing my last round to not get another qualification, though I still have my Hall of Fame invite, so I can still play at one of the other PTs this year if I want to. And if I do well at the second one, I could play in the third one, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But
didn't you only need the 1 win?
Yeah, I lost my last round in a really favorable position in Pioneer, and that was, not – so – at the end of it, I didn't feel great about my record. I went 8-8. That's not a good record. I'm not happy about that. But the PT itself was a lot of fun. Like you said, seeing everyone was really cool. There was a lot of just like kind of the PT vibes that we're used to. And I think that that's kind of what we're there for. Like when I posted that when I did that sign off and then it was made into a comic, right, about like the first couple days of the PT, that all felt the same. Like, we had maybe some turnover in who was there, but there was a lot of familiar faces there. It was not short on PT mainstays. And there was just, a lot of good vibes. So I wish I had done better. I'm still disappointed. with how it all turned out. I felt like I was playing a combo deck. I was playing Indomitable Creativity and Pioneer, where you cast the Creativity for 2 and get Xenaghost and World Spine Worm and attack them for 30. And I just had a bunch of games where just like little things went wrong, and that, didn't work out the way I wanted them to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good choice. That's what Reed was playing.
It won the PT,
too.
yeah. Reed's on my team.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, I just had a bunch of things not break my way. Like I drew World Spine Worm one of the games on the turn I was going to combo, and that's always just a beat. Had a couple games where I like needed to draw an untapped land and didn't, that sort of thing. And that's the kind of stuff that like can always happen, can happen to anyone. And when it happens, like you can't really do well in your tournament if that stuff happens a lot. And that being said, I mean, the accountability part, like I could definitely feel that I wasn't at like the complete top of my game, and I don't think that's a big surprise, right? Like that's not the sort of thing that, like, I did a good amount of practice. I wasn't unhappy with my practice or with my like where I ended up, but there was a couple times when I was like, like if I was playing these PTs every couple months and playing a Grand Prix, once or twice a month, like this spot I would know what to do a lot easier. It took me a little longer to get to some of those things. So that was just a reflection of like kind of where I'm at now, right? Like it's hard to maintain that level of practice, and I haven't, even though I think I did a pretty good job of getting up to where I want to be now.
What did it feel, this is the first one back, so there was a lot, and it's also the first one of the season, so there's like a lot of incentive to use a qualification if you have it, or to get qualified for this first one so you can try to put together kind of a season-long run or something like that.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense for if this was a one-off that felt that way, or is it just it's back?
It's in between. I think that people are going to go to the next ones, and I think that people are going to have fun at these, and I know the people who have done well on my team are all like pretty stoked to go, right? Okay. You have Reed who won the PT, or Nassif or Jacob Toth, these guys who are like queued for Worlds and queued for the next 3 Ps, and they're all 3 PTs, and they're all talking about testing plans and what, all that stuff. But I do think overall the system isn't as sticky as the previous system. So
yeah,
a lot of people made it out to this specific tournament who I don't think will necessarily make it out to another tournament. Or won't make as big of an effort, right? Like Paulo came to this one, he said he couldn't go to the second one, and he said overall, like I don't know that he said like it's going to be something that he's routinely going to.
Right. It's just the travel and the stuff was too much to justify. You said you took some Zoomers to school and you did a little money drafting, like you were full on like late night at the PT site money, like was it?
Well, this was on Sunday during the day, but
okay. I was kind of had a vision in my head there.
But yeah, no, it was me, Sam Pardee, and Tom Martell. It worked out such that Tom and Sam both went 1-2 and I went 3-0, and we managed to carry the draft. So
so that's 3 PT champs, by the way, right? Yeah, all 3 of you.
I mean, there are some people who would say Sam was not a full PT champ because he won one of the online PTs. Sam's one of those people. The only reason I mention it is Sam's like, I don't think that really counts like a PT because people weren't trying as hard and there weren't as like not everyone played. So
I did not realize that.
A reasonable take. I tend to find those discussions to be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really care too much one way or the other. Yeah, I guess is the way I feel about it.
But that's pretty cool that you're out there hunting, like the good old days. No,
it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and then the last thing is, so when it came to the preparation, you said you felt pretty good about it. Did you get a chance to do any in-person drafts, or did you get to do a team meeting or anything like that?
Oh yeah, we did do a team meeting, and we actually did. Sorry, I did an in-person practice draft when you guys had us come in to practice for coverage. Mm-hmm. When the day before the PT, we did have a good team meeting where we laid out all the commons. So first, what we end up doing is kind of stack ranking the commons and then talking about each one. That's the important part, especially in this set where some commons just don't work for some decks. And then laying out the uncommons, talking about each archetype, and then also comparing all the rares to the top uncommons. And there were some that are like, okay, we don't really spend time discussing the Wanderer or Elish Norn. They're just better than the commons, but we do spend some amount of time talking about like the borderline rares, Unctus the grand meta tech. Like where do you rate that? Like where does that go?
Right. What is it better than? What is it worse than? Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the room for that. Who leads those discussions for the team you're on currently? Like, did you talk a bunch, or was it other people?
I had drafted like white green more than most of the people there, so I talked about that. Actually, Jacob Toth, one of the guys on the team, said he 2-1 his draft because of that specifically, because he hadn't drafted it, but then I had kind of gone through how the deck ticks, and he kind of was like, oh, okay, I see now. But as for who is leading it, Siggy plays a part for sure. Martin, like we have the folks who have drafted a lot and are good at limited. It was good to kind of get their viewpoint.
Any good arguments, or was it pretty civil?
No, the problem is Bennis isn't on our team at this point, so it really decreases our like argument potential significantly.
Yeah, the information just flows freely with no hindrance whatsoever. All right, well, do you know what's next? Like, do you think you're going to use your Hall of Fame invite at the next one, or do you have a sense for that?
I don't know.
You're kind of letting it settle and then figure it out.
I would like to go to Minneapolis. I'll see if I can make that work. Barcelona is going to be tougher, so it makes sense, I think, to me to go to Minneapolis and not go to, and maybe not go to Barcelona. Well, we'll have to see.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck with it, man. That's a tough beat, that getting so close. But
yeah, I mean, it wasn't like anything completely wild happened to me in any direction at the PT. I would have liked to do well because this was like, the first one back.
High leverage, yeah.
And also for the first time in many years, I found myself in a position to not be invited to all of them, right?
Right.
And so this would have been a good one, I feel like, to kind of do well. But if it's not in the cards, it's not in the cards. That is sometimes what happens.
Yeah, and it's welcome back to tournament magic, right? The ups and the downs. Yeah. And by the way, we should say huge congrats to Reed. Reed Duke ended up winning the PT. It was a really awesome moment, getting to commentate him winning. I mean, I've got to watch. I mean, Reed came in, just before I started doing coverage, so he was, the young up and comer when I was, starting out, and so I followed his entire career, and he's a friend, and one of the good guys. He's just one of those people that just does it right. It's like he works really hard. He's nice to people. He cares about it a lot. It's kind of like, what's up with this guy? But to see somebody like that, especially with the ups and the downs of a tournament career that he's had. I mean, finishing second at Worlds and like absolute heartbreaking scenario, and just having so many of those near misses to finally, get that stamp for a guy that's been playing Magic for his whole life. It was really cool. So congrats, Reed. Great job. Let's talk a little bit about one here before we go, Luis. Boy, this has been a really polarizing draft format.
Yeah, it has. I think that there's some like interesting cross currents going on with all that. Like I kind of mentioned before, like whenever there's a difference of opinion on stuff like this, there's some people who like push back against people being too negative, but there's some people I feel like who are like overly positive. There's also the whole content creator thing where you do have a bit of an incentive to be positive
or to make a hot take or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Overall, I think that if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. And it doesn't really matter, right? Like it's right. No one can, I think, tell you can't enjoy this or this isn't fun, because if you find it fun, you find it fun. That's basically it. But that all being said, I think that this format, like the speed of the format, the impact the rares have, like it's, I don't know, hard to argue that this format doesn't have some flaws to it. And I personally don't like, I'm not going to say this is probably my least favorite format since AFR, though I like it more than AFR.
Agreed. I agree on both. Yeah.
But one of the things you can look at when you look at this is like, hey, what is this format? This is like our new benchmark for fastest format, right?
It is.
Like this is in our post-arena age. Like no one remembers Zendikar anymore.
Right.
Right.
And we don't know exactly how fast Zendikar was. We didn't have
Yeah, we didn't have
average
this
turn that it finishes. I mean, Moto
right.
does, but we didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have the quite the like precise data for this kind of stuff. So we don't know exactly where that would have ended up. So now one is going to be a useful like benchmark of like, this is the speed of a really fast format, and what lessons can you take away from that, and just lessons you can take away from one in general, both things that apply here directly to this format, which is good to talk about, and then also like, what does that look like outside of this format? Because I do feel like, every format has something that it can help teach you, and some of that stuff is going to be more specific to that format, but it can still kind of carry with you. And look, I use lessons from Zendikar when I evaluate fast formats now.
Totally.
I use lessons from Rise of the Eldrazi when I think about ramp, and carrying that stuff forward is a really good way to get value out of it. Plus, this isn't the longest draft format in history. We're getting a new set in like a month, so
yeah,
that's not too bad. A little over a month. So I guess to look at these one or more tips, as it were. One is that you just got to grab one drops. The days are long since past where one drops weren't that great and limited. They used to not be good.
Right.
They used to generally be too underpowered. Now everything's faster. Not even just this format. Other formats are, I think, generally faster than old limited formats used to be, where you were kind of punished by drawing a one drop on turn 5. Now it's like one drops are great. There's 13 one drop creatures in the set. They're all good. Like,
it's incredible.
The worst is probably the tapper, the sinew slinger or whatever. The sinew dancer. Yeah, but I mean, all the rest of them range from good to great. Evolving, adapted, exuberant, fusing are great. Bilious Skulldweller is great. Then you have like Crawling Chorus, Cacophony, Scamp, Rustvine, Cultivator, all good. Like, these cards are all just very, very good. So one drops are fantastic, and the one drop spells are also good. I mean, they don't impact the board in quite the same way, though. Hexgold Slash, of course, does. So like, some of the one drop spells are really important. And the thing I would carry on from that, honestly, is that I think that's just status quo going forward. I think one drops are now good unless proven otherwise. Agreed. And that's how I would evaluate them.
That has happened numerous times to us, where we have shifted the way that we approach one drops on our set reviews. Maybe last year, year before, where now when I look at one, I can still read it and still say, that doesn't look very good, but I know it's going to be a thing. Right? Like, it's just, you just know, like, no, it's going to fit in, or it's going to overperform, or it's going to be exactly what an archetype needs. And you're going to see this card on the battlefield. And I go in under that assumption until proven otherwise. That has been very consistent. I did want to ask you one question about this, Luis, just conceptually, because I'm curious, which is, it felt like before, in the old days, now we should call it, that one drops would give you 1 mana worth of creature, which wasn't enough, right? Just to justify a magic card in your deck. But now they are perhaps not quite at the 2-drop level, but I feel like I routinely get between 1.5 and 1 3/4 mana, to kind of put a number to it, worth of creature out of my one drops. And that shift, that bumping those up that much, where they're not necessarily as good as the 2 drops in the set, but where they're knocking on the door, that's what's changed everything. I mean, they're so much better now. These cards, many of them compare very favorably to 2 drops. Yeah, they totally do. I mean, you have cards that, like Cacophony Scamp straight up trades for a 2-drop, right? Yes. You have Skulldweller trades for a 2-drop. Right, exactly. You have Evolving Adaptive. It's basically a 3-drop. Like, that card is just absurd. And then even at common rarity, like Crawling Chorus definitely does a lot of good work. You've got, Exuberant Fuseling, which will eventually get bigger. Like, these cards are all really, really strong, and you get really paid off for putting them in your deck. Yeah, it's. I always think about this, for Magic, in that one of probably its greatest strength, right, as a game, is the mana system, but it does box you in, right? They've made uncards that were 1/2 of a mana, right? Or cost half a mana, and they gave you half a card worth of stats, sort of. And, I've often thought that Magic would be a lot better if there was a 1.5 mana slot and a 2.5 mana slot, where they could
just trying to get that granularity in there.
Right. Because I mean, if you make a 2-drop and you make it like very solid, right, in order to make it that same card as a 3, like you need to pump it up a lot. And if you need to make it a 1, you need to pump it down a lot. And that's like it makes the design space kind of limited. And what they ended up doing was kind of cheating it a little and just saying, well, what if we want ones to be relevant for limited? I have not heard anybody say that from Wizards, but the writing's on the wall.
Yeah,
right?
It's so clear that that's what they intend.
Right. And so, they decided just to say, well, what if we made these, approaching the 2 mana power level? And that's what we've got now. The question, of course, in a bigger picture is, what's the cost of doing that? And maybe you could help me break this down, because with these type of problems where there's multiple factors that go in, you can't just point to one thing, but it does feel like pumping up the 1-drops has significantly speeded up the formats, right? The trend is definitely towards faster, not slower. And that does have what I would call an unfortunate byproduct of bumping out a lot of the mid-range strategies that require a little bit of time in the oven to get going, right? I think a good example would be like the blue-red oil deck from this set, something like that, where, you want to crack your Skull Bomb and put the 2 counters on the thing and then remove them and get some value and pay for that value. If you weren't getting assaulted, that deck has some really powerful cards and interactions that are fairly costed in the set, but they just get squeezed out when your opponent starts out so low with cards that are, again, knocking at the door on the 2-drop level. And I wonder, is there a way to balance that back out? Because I assume, look, I like really slow formats. Fine. It's okay if I don't get those very often, just like generally speaking, really fast formats that come out. But I assume that the designers want some breathing room for these mechanics so people can do fun stuff. And if you notch up the 1-drops too much, it does feel like it squeezes it.
Yeah, looking at the 1-drops, they're more than half are quite aggressive. You're evolving adaptives and exuberant fuselings.
Right.
And then some of the weaker ones, like Glistener Seer, are not as aggressive. But
interesting.
I don't think what you said has to be true. I think what you said, where pushing 1-drop power level definitely does tend to speed things up. People are casting spells on turn 1 instead of not. Like, those spells are going to hasten the end of the game. That said, you don't have to make all your 1-drops 1/1 flyers or things with menace or things like that. Like, you can make your 1-drops. I mean, Rustvine Cultivator ramps you, but I don't think that makes the games that much faster. It just lets you play your 5-mana card on turn 4. It doesn't ramp you on turn 2, right? It doesn't even start till turn 3. And
that's right.
If you use it on turn 3, you can't use it on turn 4. So you could make 1-drop designs that don't push aggression or don't necessarily push speed. And I think that just leads to more gameplay and more interaction, which I think is good. I don't think they all have to be, 1-mana, 1/1 flyer type cards that are by nature very aggressive.
Okay, so I should look for more sinew dancers. That's like, I want to see 1-drops with activated abilities and stuff like that, rather than 1-drops that are meant to
Glistener
just
Seer is a great one, right? 1-mana 0/3 helps you block early and then gets you a couple scries in to help try to set up your game plan.
Okay.
The second point here is don't cross the streams. Don't put Mandible Justiciar in your white-green deck. Don't put Pestilent Siphoner in your red-black deck. And this was a lesson that I think a lot of the people who have drafted have learned at this point. But it's a tough lesson, because if you weren't paying attention to this, then you would end up in a lot of trouble, because you would just be putting cards in decks that didn't fit. The way Paul Riesel described it when we showed up and we were talking to him at the PT is a lot of these are just secret gold cards. And I think that's a good way to think about that.
That's a great way to put it.
Things like Mandible Justiciar is really a blue-white card. Things like Duelist of Deep Faith is closer to a white-black card or white-green card than it is anything else.
Right.
And you really have to pick your spots. Leonin Lightbringer is a white-red card. No one's putting that card in anything but white-red and expecting to do well. So
I like
knowing what the gold cards are is really, really good for success in this format.
Is this the type of thing that you think that Jakub was talking about when you went down the white-green deck and how it works for him? Is that he had a better idea of what not to put in the deck or cards that were devalued?
a really important part about this is not just what cards you put in your deck. It's also specifically what cards you don't want to put in your deck, what cards shouldn't be played and don't really work.
And that to me is where like,
that.
Yeah, exactly. Because that to me is where, things like 17 lands data break down. Right. Well, I'm drafting black, white. You look up Mandible just this year and you're like, this is solid common. Like this card you can put in your deck. I'll put it in my deck. And it's like, well, you made a mistake. That is not what this is trying to do.
Right. And that I mean, obviously that is connected to knowing the archetypes, but it is really important to know those things and to be able to kind of utilize those things in the right way. So
right.
I think that when you look at the kind of themed cards, the secret gold cards, being able to identify that and also knowing what is a signal, what is not. And when you do something like when you have a bunch of green cards and you take a white card, that could mean you're going into white green. It could also mean you're going to pivot into white because that white card is a white blue card and you're not necessarily going in that direction. I really don't want you to look at the cards you have drafted and be like, I have 4 green cards and 2 white cards, so maybe I'm white green if the 2 white cards are not cards that fit into that. Maybe you're having inroads into a white blue deck and that's totally fine. But don't think you're going down a road that you're not.
What about the next point? I feel bad for it.
Yeah. Avoid the weak color, in this case blue, if possible. And what that means is, again, know your spots, because this isn't the most polarized I've ever seen a draft format in terms of color balance was green in Battle for Zendikar, where a lot of the people who drafted a lot recommended that you never draft green. Like you literally, it was impossible. Like you should not be taking this color of cards. And that's a totally reasonable viewpoint in that format. Like that format is terrible. The green is terrible in that format. Blue is not that bad here in Phyrexia All is One, but it isn't good. Like you don't want to be drafting blue.
So I just did a quick check. I ordered the commons in the set by games in hand win rate, which is kind of our default best cards. Of the non-gold cards, which I don't think there's any, but the first blue common, which, as you mentioned before, is Gataxian Raptor, a perfectly fine magic cards, comes up at number.
That's better than a perfectly fine magic card. It's a 3-mana 1/4 flyer that can fluctuate up to a 4/1, anywhere in between, depending on how the combat's going, and also has oil synergies with other cards.
Yeah, it's actually just a good card. It is number 29. There are 28 green, white, red, and black cards above it on the list. I mean, what in the world? So, yeah, I think it's safe to say that being aware of and avoiding blue, if possible, is a good shortcut. And then, yeah, you would be best served to know when blue is appropriate. But wow, that's a beating.
And so what the conclusion you can take from it is not never draft blue. Though honestly, I think if you approach this format as like, hey, I just refuse to draft blue, that's not actually the worst.
That's actually a
possible
not
thing.
Crazy, like not optimal, but definitely not terrible. One question about blue, by the way, there were some rumors coming out of your testing house that some of the players really liked blue black. Yeah.
So really liked is a little bit strong, but expressing that you did like it, of course, does give people a little bit of the interest in what's going on.
Okay.
So Martin, Juza, and Siggy both drafted blue black at a higher rate than I would have expected. Sam Party also liked it, and unsurprisingly, Martin ended up drafting it at the PTA even. I think that what they were looking at mostly was there's either blue-black poison where you're like trying to put Pestilent Siphoner out and proliferate poison and even use Touchify Recess and just kind of race, like you're not trying to fully control the game. Your cards are trying to delay the game more than anything else.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the blue-black control deck that doesn't even really want 1/1 flying toxic and is just like Glistener Seer into removal spell into Voidwing Hybrid, the uncommon where you proliferate, get it back, that sort of thing. And it was interesting seeing them talk about what the kind of what the pick orders were for those. And I do think that you can do something with those strategies. Like, look, I know that the 17 lands data has blue, black, and blue decks in general doing very poorly. I'm not saying you should just be jamming blue here, but I also think that it's important to know if you open Blue Sun's Twilight, a fantastic card.
Yes. And
you get past, all the blue cards you want. In some cases, you should draft blue. Like, I'm not saying you should take, a mediocre green card over a blue bomb. Like, I don't think we're that far yet. And I still would recommend, like, I would take the blue Dominus, the 2 blue 3/5 flyer over basically every common or uncommon, because it's a 4-mana 3/5 flyer. Like, we're not at a point where I think you need to go that so far out of your way. That being said, you shouldn't draft blue very often. I don't think it's good, though. To tease an upcoming show, there's a certain Hall of Famer who thinks blue is the second best color. No joke, like no exaggeration. And we'll be interesting to see how that discussion goes.
Yeah, I think one of the other points that was made about the blue-black deck by your teammates there was also that they admitted that it was power level based, meaning, how like if you start in, let's say your deck ends up being white-green, your first few picks might be like a Contagious Vorak and a Planar Disruption and, hey, I got a nice uncommon, or maybe I got lucky and got a rare or something like that. But, you can make a good white-green deck off of primarily commons with, a little bit of extra stuff sprinkled in. But if you start off with like Gitaxian Raptor and you're like, this blue deck's just going to come together and I got the foundation for it, now you're in trouble, right? Where if you start off with, say, a gold uncommon or a great rare, like you mentioned, well, the deck can perform if you get the power level. So you have to keep your eye open for it because, there could be a pretty strong correction away from it. A lot of people don't want to draft blue.
So one of the points that they really emphasized was that if you don't have a good rare or uncommon, you shouldn't be in blue.
Okay, there you go.
And that's I think a really good way to think about it. Like Look, if you first pick Drown and Ichor and you second pick Afflict with Infection, right? These like 2 good black uncommon removal spells, and then third pick there's a Voidwing hybrid, the blue-black 2/1. That's a pretty legit sign that blue-black's open, blue's open, and this card goes really well with your first 2 picks. You can take it. Obviously, you're not locked into blue, but you're keeping the possibility open. If you then get a Gitaxian Raptor, followed by Experimental Augury, the Anticipate plus Proliferate, that's a good place to be. You're not in bad shape if that's where you're going.
Yeah. Okay. What's your last one or more tip?
This has to do with combat tricks. You really want to navigate combat carefully, and I'm not saying that that's different from other sets, but this is one where there's a lot of combat tricks. They're good, and knowing how to draw them out or how to use them both is really, really rewarding. So I had a match against Seth Manfield, fantastic player, former world champion, all that stuff, Hall of Famer. And it was open decklist, and that was kind of weird, right? Open decklist is not something you usually get in limited, but because it was open decklist, I did get to see all of the combat tricks he had. He had the 2 and a green +2/+2, the Mantle. He had Freed from Flesh, and he had Titanic Growth. He had almost all of them, right? And in one of the games, I was able to set it up so that he went for a combat trick, and I had a Rebel Salvo, the deal 5, to just completely blow him out. And he even was like, "Oh man, I forgot that you had that because you only had 2 mana up, and I actually was a white-red equipment, so I was able to cast it."
Brutal! Wow.
And then the other game, he had mulliganed and then went Exuberant Fuseling into Rustvine Cultivator into Predation Shepherd. So 1-drop, 1-drop, 2-drop, just a bunch of creatures in play. And my draw was a little slow. And then on turn 3, when he attacked, I just didn't block and just took the damage because I was able to then play another creature. And then if he attacked, which he ended up not doing, I could have double blocked. And if he had any of his combat tricks, it would have been advantageous for me.
Yes.
And what's really important with all of this is to just know when, like sometimes your opponent attacks you. Like let's go back to Rustvine Cultivator. Let's say your opponent goes turn 1 Crawling Chorus, and then you play turn 1 Rustvine Cultivator. If they attack on turn 2, I'm pretty likely to block there because if they use a combat trick, even if they use complete devotion and draw a card, they spent their turn 2 killing my Rustvine Cultivator. Like unless of course your hand like, really needs it or whatever.
Right.
But for the most part, that is just not something that's gonna be a bad exchange for you. Like we've talked a lot about.
It won't be worse.
Right. Yeah. It's not like it gets better over time. And we've talked a lot about most of the time when my opponent attacks me, if they had a combat trick face up on turn 3, I would block.
Yes.
Like if I literally could see the combat trick in their hand, I would block. And the reason is stopping them from playing a creature on that turn is a pretty good exchange, given that it's not like that combat trick isn't going to trade for one of your creatures at some point. Of course, if you have a 1-mana instant in your hand and you just need to wait to untap, that's a very different thing. You can wait. But for the most part, you should not be afraid to trade for a combat trick even when you know is coming.
Yeah, it's funny because I've got a reputation for being a calling station when it comes to that stuff for the reason that you just described. Like even face up, I may just say, sure, let's just get this out of the way. But this is the set that I call the least with, like in a long time. Like I find myself going, I can do better than that. And I'm going to just take it, because a lot of times the real question is just, are we dealing with corrupted or not? Right. Like that ends up being the thing, because a lot of the creatures are actually quite small, but they happen to have toxic 1. So like damage wise, you're like, I could take 3. It's not like, I don't need to risk all this stuff, but am I going to get corrupted? And that ends up being the tension more often than not. But like I said, a lot of the times I'll take it where in most sets, I'm just like, show me.
So the thing to think about when they have combat tricks are, am I going to play around this better in a future turn? What happens if they use it this turn? What happens if I take it? And what do I expect to change over time as well? Maybe you have multiple bounce spells in your deck, and you don't have one right now, but if you have like multiple serum snares and you think it would really blow them out to use one, maybe you take the 2 and you take the 2 a few more times and you're okay doing that. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, once you've solved that, you can kind of figure out in a lot of cases, when is it good to use a combat trick, or when is it good to block versus not, even if you highly suspect or know they have a combat trick coming.
Yeah. And that the thing that you said that I always think about is it getting better? Yeah. Right.
Like that's the main question to answer, honestly.
Yeah. And oftentimes it comes down to, like you said, you took it kind of one step further. I've got multiple ways to interact that are still in my library, and I have some life total to give. So I'm going to give my chance a deck to find those and leverage them. But a lot of times it's more straightforward. It's the example you gave a minute ago where you said, like, I have a Hexgold Slash in my hand. It's just I'm tapped out right now. So, okay, fine, I'll take it this one time. But now I have this flexibility where I can play a card next turn and still keep up the 1 red mana. And now my opponent's in a pickle. Like, they have to look at that 1 red mana, and everybody knows about Hexgold Slash. It's not like, you're catching somebody off guard with that card, right? And so they have to really look at you and go, do I want to open up the door here on an attack? And a lot of times, the play pattern is they attack when you're tapped out, and then when you're not, they don't, because they know, hey, I don't want to. And then that's fine. That's just how it plays out.
That's a totally fine way to end up. And when you have combat tricks, not only should you be thinking about kind of the same things, you should be aware your opponent's also thinking about that. Yeah. So one of the traps I've seen people get into is they attack, their opponent doesn't block because they're afraid of the combat trick. Next turn, their opponent leaves mana up and they just attack like nothing's changed.
I know.
But it's all changed. They have mana up.
Huge blowout potential there. Yeah. I think that's a level up moment that you hit when you first, because kind of the way that I think about Magic is when you first start playing, you have to understand what your cards do and what your board state is up to and how to use your mana. And it's a bit of a stretch mentally to then start tracking everything that your opponent's doing on board and also trying to figure out what they could have in their hand. But as you build up the muscle memory in your brain of tracking your own cards, understanding what everything does, how does the board sit right now, who's ahead, who's that, then you start to look over at your opponent's board and you start to be able to really process that. And then you finally start to say, what are they doing? Like, what's their plan? What card could they have? What should I be playing around? What should, and then that starts to become muscle memory, that kind of thing. And I think one of the big level up moments is the one that you described, right? It's the one where you realize, oh, it's a lot different now. I did get away with the attack last turn. I'm not going to do that again this turn. That's kind of you can pat yourself on the back the first time when you fully recognize, all right, the risk profile looks real bad now, even though it was completely clean the turn prior.
And at the end of the day, too, you also have to, if you want to fully maximize, know what you represented to them in the past, even if you don't have that necessary
Tell
trait.
the story, right?
At one point, one of my opponents attacked with some of their creatures, but not all. And I was able to rule out Titanic Growth.
Okay.
Because had they had Titanic Growth, I think their 1/1 would have also attacked.
Uh-huh.
But it made much more sense for them to have the +3/+1 instead.
Gotcha.
And that's the sort of thing that you kind of have to mentally catalog and get to a point where you know what is coming, and you're able to kind of play around it. So
yeah.
Combat tricks are among the best part of Limited. I really enjoy playing with and against them. They're really satisfying, and I walked away from my match with Seth feeling like I had done a really good job of maximizing my win percentage in those spots. And unfortunately for me, they're not going to do open deck lists most likely for Limited.
Oh, I didn't know
at the
that.
next PT. And that's bad because I can look at a sheet of cards and I know what all the card names are and I can remember all of them.
Yeah.
And most of my opponents couldn't. I mean, they told me that.
Yeah. I mean, that plays into your personal strengths I think it's better not very well.
I don't think that they were necessary, but yes, it did. It was like, dang, I wouldn't have minded that.
Yeah. Not the worst, but combat tricks are something that you don't see much of outside of Limited as well. It's kind of a one of the ways of interacting with the game that isn't used and constructed outside of a few niche categories like poison decks or whatever. But all right, well, let's call it a show there, Luis. Good stuff. I liked your one or more tips, but I am curious what people are up to with regards to the format and kind of where they're at with it too. One thing I wanted to mention before we go and just kind of open it up for feedback from our listeners via Twitter or however you can get a hold of us was we were talking about it before the show and how compressed the life cycle of Limited and other formats as well is in the current setting where, the set comes out and then people can play it, quite early on Arena. And then they can play it a lot, right? I mean, they can really jam out and we get like a pretty good sample size going on 17 lands. We get a lot of opinions. There's tons of content, podcasts like ours or articles and YouTube videos and stuff like that of people kind of breaking things down, giving their opinions and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just curious, if a set comes out once every 3 months on average, I don't know, before like, let's say before Arena came out or something, it felt like maybe we got a couple of months worth of good stuff. And then it was kind of like, okay, people are kind of, the format is what it is. The people that are still playing it are still playing it, but the people that don't aren't. But that does seem to have been compressed, now like it's a little, we've had to, adjust our show schedule, right? Where like we used to do our first impression show after the 2 set reviews and we don't even call it that. We call it the format overview now because it just feels like the set's been out forever by that point. And like Luis and I were talking about how, we really try to get on the commons and uncommons review because that's kind of the bread and butter for us Limited players. But, sometimes it does feel like the rare and mythic rare shows kind of, hey, the set's been out for a while. I've been drafting it this whole time. We want to get on it. It's a little tough for us to do the level of quality that we want. If we were trying to do 2 of those in a week or something, that would probably be a bit much. But anyway, it did just prompt a discussion between Luis and I about, for our audience, for the people that listen to our show, like, do you feel that the set is, you're kind of over it sooner than you used to be, or in a pretty quick fashion? As an example, and also, how does that relate to the frequency at which you draft? Because I know that we've got a lot of hardcore Limited players in our listenership, right? People like us that just kind of fired up and draft, and it's kind of the thing that they do. But we've also got a lot of people who, draft a few times a week, or it's a maybe an F&M thing, or I got one Arena draft a week that I let myself do because I don't have that much time, or, whatever. And I'm curious if there's a correlation there. Because I think if you only drafted it once or twice a week, you'd probably feel, like the set's pretty fresh for quite a while. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of throw that out to the audience. And if you guys have any thoughts on that, feel free to send it to us on our Twitters or whatever.
In particular, we would love to, if anyone had any suggestions on how we could handle the rare and mythic show timing that doesn't involve us just doing 2 sets, two shows in the same week.
Yeah.
Or change things about there. I don't know. It's just tough because we want to bring you, great data in a timely fashion, but the Limited review is the common uncommon one is a really long review. So I don't think it's very feasible for us to just be like, let's just record a 5-hour show and a 3.5-hour show in the same week or whatever.
Yeah, because I mean, I think one way to frame this would be if there were no constraints, how would we do it? Right.
And that would clearly be
right. And it would be, we would have both reviews out the day that the set was spoiled, right? Not even like out, to play, but the day it was spoiled for like the loading ready run pre-release or whatever, we would have those reviews out immediately. And then as soon as Luis and I felt comfortable talking about it, we would have the format overview out, probably 4 or 5 days later, but that's if you took it all away. But I'll tell you that if we rewind, before the time was so compressed, I don't know that we would have wanted to, like, there was something kind of fun about waiting and, letting these things kind of unfold in a more natural way. So,
I mean, there's been a couple times when it's lined up such that we were prepped and ready, and as soon as the spoiler dropped, we just literally started that hour.
That's right.
But that's not always going to be the case.
Right. I mean, we just have busy lives, and Luis has a busy life, and so it can be kind of tough. Anyway, so if you as a listener have any thoughts on that, again, dialing into what Luis said about when the mythic and rare set review show comes out, we'd love to know. So let us know. All right, let's call it a show there, Luis. If you want to find us on social media, it's Marshall_LR and LSV, and we're on there. I'm not on there as often as I used to be because they killed the phone app that I use, and the Twitter one's kind of annoying. So I'm only usually check it when I'm actually at my computer now, which also hasn't been the worst. Twitter can be a bit of a time suck and kind of a weird place to be. So, but I will check, after the show goes up and kind of see what people are saying. We just kind of want to pulse, for that. If you want to find this episode of the show or any of the episodes that we've ever done, it's at lrcast.com. You can find everything related. You can also find our Twitter profiles and stuff on there too. So you can make sure to check that out if you want to catch up. We want to thank our sponsor, TCG Player and Channel Fireball, once again for their continued sponsorship of the show. And with that, we will see you next week.
So we do have a date for the LR versus LOL Showdown. It is on Friday, so it's tomorrow as of the recording, March 3rd, 6 p.m. Pacific. And as usual, I would like to make predictions as to what the 6 drafters are going to draft.
I like this.
So, starting with by record and any other metric of evaluation underdogs, the Lords of Limited, we've got Alex Nikolic, Corticals, and you know what? He's going to have the lowest curve black-white deck that you can imagine. He's just going to have 3 choruses. He's going to have a bunch of Flensing Raptors. And
he's going to smoke us too. I just know he's due for just a trashing.
He's not even going to have a bunch of busted rares. His deck's just going to be really tight, really fast, and he's gonna crush both of us. But BK is going to beat him. I'll get to with what later. So Alex is going to go 2-1.
I want over under a number of colors in BK's deck.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, you've got Lord Tupperware and Mr. Metronome. Ethan and Ben, and they're going to have a pitched battle because they're both going to be cutting each other off of prophetic prisms. But little do they know, BK is also going to be going after the prophetic prisms. So the 3 of them are really, it's just going to be a murderer's row of second pick prophetic prisms. Lord Tupperware is going to open an Atraxa, and he's just not going to be able to help himself. There's just nothing he can do about it. He just had a baby. He's probably sleep deprived. He's going to go down that path, and. He's gonna redeem himself. He's actually gonna get the monkey off his back. He's gonna beat BK, and he's gonna go 2-1 as well. Okay. Defeating you with an Atraxa because the deck you draft isn't gonna be able to beat Atraxa or kill him fast enough before he plays it. Of course not.
Yeah, I already know what I'm drafting anyway.
And that leaves Mr. Metronome, Ben, and he's gonna be kind of forced into drafting Jund. He's gonna be draft green black. He's gonna splash red for a Luca, I think is what it's gonna be. It's going to be a bomb like that, and it's going to be all Testament bearers all the way down. That's going to be his bread and butter.
This is too good. I love it.
But you know what? I've got to say, I think he's going to go 1-2. I think his Luca is going to squeeze it out over BK, and I think the Lords are going to go 5-4 against us. This is going to be their format. Really, I think that they might edge us out and bring the series total to a 5-4. But what is BK going to draft? Well, as usual, BK is going to lean back on his, classic Sultai deck, which is no real synergies, got the worst color combinations, but he's somehow gonna go 1-2 defeating Alex as his only win. I know what I'm going to draft. I'm going to draft mediocre red-green aggressive, a lot of combat tricks, all commons.
Titanic growths, baby. I want the third best option.
Down.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think I'm going to go 1-2 as well. That's going to leave you holding the bag at 2-1. And I think that you're going to end up drafting black-white, but a very controlling black-white deck.
Oh, I like that.
You barely get them to 3 poison, and then you've got multiple of the Vivisection Surgeons, the 4/4 that destroys on ETB. But I'm kind of predicting the Lords might get us this time. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I just have a feeling that these guys are just gonna have a stranglehold on this thing. What about BK though?
Oh, I said he was going to draft Sultai and go 1-2.
Poor BK.
Yeah, well,
Sultai prophetic prism for life.